Professor Hans Bobek, you have been active as a geographer since the 20s. It's more than half a century, and half of that time you have been ordinarius at the University of Vienna. I'm very pleased that you let me come and ask you some questions about the development of your thinking as a geographer. And I would like to begin with a question. I understand that you have a classical education. So then, why did you become a geographer?
Well, the fact is that I first was going in for history. I studied history, geography, and some social science. And first I was mostly interested in history. Also my dissertation, my first dissertation, was dealing with a historic topic in the Alsace, some possession questions. And I left it only when I learned that the French abbé was doing the same already since several years. So I finished up this and asked my professor, Steinacker was his name, to give me another theme.
Where was that? Was that in
That
Innsbruck?
was in Innsbruck,
Yeah,
where I studied. And he got nervous, and for some reason or the other, he didn't give me another topic. So after several other questioning several other people, I went to Professor Sölch, who was then the geographer in Innsbruck, and asked him. And finally, we fixed the theme as a theme Innsbruck, to deal with Innsbruck, an urban geography of Innsbruck.
That surprises me a little bit, because Sölch, after all, was a geomorphologist.
Sölch was the latest, or one of the latest pupils of Albrecht Penck, and of course was a trained geomorphologist. And his teachings were mainly of that area. And, but it was myself who proposed this topic for my dissertation, and he agreed.
Was it a new thing in German geography then to deal with cities?
No. Well, I had not yet really worked on that or read very much, but immediately after I had fixed this topic or this theme, I went into the literature and to find out which main lines I should follow. I remember then Schlüter's Kulturlandschaftslehre was mainly followed by all people who studied cities, and this was mainly a description and classification of what was visible.
So in a sense it was a continuation of geomorphology
One could say so, I think. You are right. But for me, for some reasons, perhaps because I had heard some lectures of social science in Innsbruck, it seemed not to be enough. I wanted to explain the features one could observe, and I wanted to explain it as an outcome of functional behavior of people. So, more or less, I took that for a main line of my book, of my dissertation, and I had the great joy that it was printed immediately after I finished
if I remember right, you had already, before the Innsbruck study, written a small paper on the Grundfrage,
yes,
the basic
that
question.
was the outcomes of my study of this literature on urban geography of those days.
Do you remember what you then listed as the main problems of urban geography?
Well, the problems were the classification of the features, visible features of urban, cities. So I was finding my way more or less myself. I remember I read several French studies, and they seemed to me to be much more flexible and much better in my sense, which I wanted to follow. Well, and I may add that in this paper you mentioned, I have already tried to make a sort of a theory of city. A city would be forced to concentrate because of those activities which make up the city, really make up a city. That I didn't call them services and so on then, but the typical urban activities. But they were the services, more or less.
So you had a functional understanding already then?
Yeah, because I saw industry can, mining of course, and industry can be also without forming a city, and agriculture of course didn't form cities. So
now, you didn't remain in urban geography. That surprises me a little bit. Suddenly I find you in Iran, dealing with geomorphology. How did it happen?
Yeah, before I worked in the Alps quite a bit. Well, it came out from that Sölch, before he left Innsbruck to go to Heidelberg, made me assistant in Innsbruck University at the Geographic Institute, and told me before he left, if you want to enter the academic career, you know, you must work in the geomorphological field. Otherwise, you won't succeed. So I took that to my notice, and of course, what should I do? I left urban geography and went into the Zillertaler Alps and made a study of them, a geomorphological one, and studied the Inntal Terrace and made other things before I was called to Berlin by Professor Krebs, who wanted me to have in Berlin because of my urban studies.
I see.
But he missed to tell me that. So when I came to Berlin and saw that his 6 assistants were doing, every one of them, geomorphology, I thought I must, well, and the most recent work I had done was geomorphological. So I, in my prime lecture, I dealt with a geomorphological theme, and it was very bad. It had a heavy critique because that day they were still in the spheres of Albrecht Penck.
In Berlin in particular, I suppose.
Yeah, Berlin particularly. Penck himself was still alive.
Well, was he present?
He was present.
So you have lectured for to Penck. Oh, that's interesting. Now, let me ask you this question. Why did you select Iran or Persia when you went abroad? Or why did you have to go abroad at all?
This was, in those days, was an essential thing to do for people who wanted to advance in the academic career. You had, being a geographer, you had to go abroad as well and do some good work there. So Iran, I didn't choose for another reason, but I studied literature to find out which country relatively near country in the east. I wanted to go into the eastern, Near East or Middle East. Was not yet crowded with people, geographers.
Did you think of other countries before?
Yes, Turkey and even Cyprus and other countries, but they were more or less full of Germans, like Turkey, or French, like Syria and Iraq, with some Britishers. So I went to Iran, which, aside from several botanists and ecologists, was free of geographers.
Yeah, but you must have had language problems dealing with people there.
I had the great luck that a former interpreter of the German legation at Kabul, where Persian was the official language then, was in Berlin, and he agreed to teach me Persian in a quarter of the year. I wanted to go already. So he agreed, and he indeed managed to bring me to the point that when I came to Persia, at Pahlavi then, through Russia I went, I could understand the people and they could understand me.
Now, what did you find out in Persia then?
Being in geomorphologic lines, I wanted to find out glaciation in northwestern Persia, in the Alborz and in the in the Taurus and so on, in these parts. And so I studied them and came to quite an interesting result, namely that there was no pluvial period, or could not have been a pluvial period, because the southern side of the Alborz range was nearly free of former glaciation, whereas the northern side, which up to now is the front side, precipitation coming from northern quadrant there, and had come in former time also, quite obviously, was full of old glaciation. So this was the first point which made me extend my studies to ecological and botanical, not botanical, vegetation questions. This was already a bit later than my first journeys to Iran, which were in the mid-30s, a bit later, and I went nearly through all of Iran for that purpose.
Now, let me go back to these findings about... you must have made quite a sensation by stating that there would not have been a pluvial time.
It was really a sensation, and immediately several people from Germany came to Iran to restudy the Alborz and other parts, and they found the usual, that there should have been a pluvial, but I could not agree with their results. And even recently, there have been several studies who came to the conclusion that even in the central, very dry central parts of Iran should have been quite a bit of glaciation. But recently I have been with several of them myself in Shirkuh area near Yazd, and I, as a trained alpinist and geographer from the Alps, I can deny that a real glaciation is to be found.
Is it generally accepted now, or there are still controversies about it?
The last is not yet made out, but the pluvial affair has been given up. So
I see. So it's a victory.
I was the first to say that.
That's good to hear. Now, you started to mention your developing ecological interest. Did it then tie in more with more humanistic problems gradually?
All the time when I was in Iran, I had an eye or interest also for the cultural features and cultural facts. Especially for the agricultural and the farmers and so on, the conditions of the farmers and so on. Less urban studies, because I thought I had not the time. I wanted to of course, I saw and I looked at the cities, but I didn't want to stick to one city and try to study it from the ground, so to say, from the base. This is a general feature of my working in Iran. I was trying to get an oversight over the whole, first of all, because there was nothing before. My vegetation map, it is in fact a map of the natural forest in Iran, its former extension, before it was ruined, was the first trial in such direction. I feel very glad that another man from Israel who studied vegetation in Iran used my map to put in his different other qualifications for steppe and so on.
Now, when talking to the people in the countryside, did you, what did you find out?
I wanted to find out, after I had taken interest, I wanted to find out the conditions of the farmers, under which conditions they work, and why the people is so poor. So this was a main question which I always followed up when I had an opportunity. I have at least 60 villages questions in that way, which are covering the west of Iran. In the east, very few.
You think you found some explanation?
Well, it helped me to form the theory of rent capitalism, which indeed needed a long time to develop and to feel sure about it.
That's again a very special concept, a new concept, I suppose, in economic history.
It is a new concept because up to now, any sort of dependence of farmers was classified as feudalism.
And you see this as different?
This is a different thing, because feudalism, or the potent people in feudalism, are interested to increase their potence, can I say so? Might, their political thing, and they are not so interested to deal with commercial and other facts, and they do not lend money and so on. They come from the Krieger, what's that? Krieger.
The warriors.
War people.
Yes.
So it seems to be, if I can go to this theory, I studied historic, very much historic material also. I came to the conclusion that this system of rent capitalism, I say capitalism because it shows essential features of capitalistic thinking. Money is used to engross the profits. It is invested in buying new land, in buying the so-called factors of production. The Iranians generally have no 5 factors of production: the land, the water where it's necessary and for artificial irrigation, the cattle for drawing, the oxen for drawing, and the little instrumentarium they have, and the seed, which plays quite a role because of the poor results of their agriculture, generally poor. And last, the work of the farmer. And the farmer is his own, he's free. He's not at all like the Western peasants who were under the yoke of the feudalists. He's free, he can go, in most cases, when he will leave the place, and he has to deal with his a quarter or a fifth of what he gets. He gets the amount, or the whole amount of harvest is divided in so many parts as factors are in the hands. So there may be 3 people who get parts of the harvest. A man who owns the land, another may own the water. Also that goes mostly together, but not all the time. Another may give the cattle for drawing, the oxen, may lend them. And each of them gets that part, equal parts for 5 factors that he owns.
Now, this,
and one can follow the expropriation of the farmers. There are areas in the peripheral parts of Iran, I've studied also such parts, where the farmers are still owners of all factors, free farmers, economically free farmers, who have nothing to give except a little to the state.
Now, this concept of rent capitalism sort of turned your attention back to towns and cities again, isn't that
yeah,
so?
And still, unfortunately, I shall come back to that, the reason for it. I did not study the cities under this respect, because I had not any longer the time later to do that. But I would like to say a word in which both are combined, were combined. Already in 1938, in the Congress of Amsterdam, I delivered a paper where I stated that I found, or I described 6 types of urban-land relationships. That was the main question.
No.
And Kristalla is one type of them, Kristalla's
right,
central place type. And amongst the others, of course, is the rent capitalist type, in which the dependence of the farmer is not so much that he buys in the city what he needs, because he generally has not enough money to buy very much. He lives a very poor life, generally.
Had you an argument with Kristalla in Amsterdam about this?
Well, yes, but not very nice argument only, because he had no idea of other countries and other cultures,
No.
in fact, so he was not interested.
No, but I understand that you had been one of the first to appreciate Kristallo's...
Yes, of course I appreciated Kristallo, because in my general paper before Innsbruck, I had already made some hints to the special need to concentration of such activities in cities. Now I found the total theory, which I hailed, of course. I was very glad about this theory, and I am proud. I'm amongst the first to have written a very an eloge about Kristallo's theory.
In
a
German,
journal, yeah.
German.
It was in Erdkunde,
Yeah.
was it, if I remember right.
Yeah. Now,
Well, I would make another point of my Iranian works. I came to ecology to study ecologic facts and ecologic conditions. And this worked out also in my general feeling about geography and thinking about geography. It is an essential factor, of course, between the human element and the abiotic natural element is the biotic element. And it is easily changed or destroyed in many ways, and so on. All these ideas have contributed to my few experimental papers in which I developed a sort of system, geographical, the system of geography.
also,
I called it.
yes.
Together with Schmidhuisen, we came very early together, so we have influenced each other. And this I have, well, I thought quite all right for a long time. Also, nowadays, I say it is not the right thing, because we spoke of an object of the geographer, which does not exist according to the more recent
What object
science
was that?
logic.
The
Object,
the landscape.
land or Landschaft.
landscape. Yeah.
We differentiated land and individuality. Landschaft, a sort of a typical arrangement of the three factors, abiotic, biotic, and human element, and so on.
Well, you was one of the earliest geographers, I think, at least in the German-speaking area, to use the term social geography or Sozialgeographie. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes. I think I could go back to my urban studies. Already then, I started with the so-called functionalistic aspect. And this aspect, or this, aspect, forces one to ask who is behind the activities, who is behind the function, who is working out, and so on. And that leads quite obviously to the social groups of different description who work in different ways, and the result, of course, is different. And so I came to the idea that this element must be studied much more deeply than it had been before. I remember again that often, for instance, Otremba, even late in the 50s, I remember an expression, he said, the human element doesn't know any laws or any Gesetzmäßigkeiten, what's
Principles.
That? Principles. It is a hopeless individuality in the human element.
Mm-hmm.
So this shows that a large group of geographers refused to deal with the human element because they thought this is entirely out of the geographical reach.
And also out of a scientific grasp.
A scientific grasp, a really scientific grasp.
And you didn't agree entirely?
I did not agree, and I had quite a bitter feud with Otremba for a time. Also, we were befriended, both, since the war. So this was the... Unfortunately, I never worked out my idea of social geography, social geography. I had given a lecture in Munich over a year, a continuing lecture on my ideas of social geography, and I remember with great joy the very live discussions we always had. 2 hours were for my lecture, and 2 hours generally were discussion.
In one piece of time?
In one piece,
Oh, that takes energy. That's fantastic. Yeah. And this has never been printed?
I have never printed that because I considered it preliminary.
No.
But there is one reason why I did not do it. It's not really my fault, but...
Who's then?
Well, this was when I came to Vienna in 1949 and took over the chair of Hassinger in Vienna. Then I had then I was taken into a group of people, mostly architects and other people of that kind, technicians and so on, who founded an Austrian society for planning and for the necessary scientific work, Raumforschung and Raumplanung. And as I was a founder with them, I had to mix up with them, and so I came to see that this is a field where geography should be present and must be present. And this made me change my direction of my lectures and so on to train my pupils or the students in this direction of Raumforschung, not planning, because I had no experience in planning. I didn't want to pass such frontiers.
And this means you did that a little bit reluctantly.
I did it reluctantly because I had great pressing to enlarge and to finish or to work out my former ideas in the urban place one side and generally speaking social geography. I wanted to work that out, but so being closed in this society, and at the university I put myself this goal It's a sort of engaged geography, which I try to do,
Yes.
not engaged in planning really, but for planning,
Yeah.
to
base, yes.
the base for.
But this, you had been in touch with Raumforschung
already when I was in Berlin, in the Nazi Zeit. I had been when in fact, I was already soldier. I was in the military geographical department of the Oberste Heeresleitung, what was the name? And there I had still a bit of time for the university when I was there in the beginnings of the 40s. And then I made excursions and so on with students in the same way. There was the idea of Raumforschung already given.
But it surprises me a little bit that Raumforschung could be taken up again so fast in Austria after the war.
Oh, yeah.
You needed, I suppose, some time to recover after the war damage.
I must state that my predecessor, Hassinger, who died unfortunately very early after after I came to Vienna, he had already taken up this in the war years and before already, and he had founded in the Austrian Academy of Science, where he was the geographer, the cultural geographer. He founded there a so-called Commission Kommission für Raumforschung und Wiederaufbau, was it called after the war. So practical intentions were already at hand in this. And when I was taken into the Academy of Science in '53, they asked me whether I would continue this commission or not. And out of my own opinion that this is important for geography and geography should work in this direction, I said, yes, I want to continue. And then, as I had other goals which were very dear to me in other lands like Iran, but also other lands which I tried to study, I was hesitating a bit to put me totally in this direction. So it was sort of trying to make two big things.
I guess you believed at that time of the decision that you would be able to do all three things. How did it go?
Of course, it was not possible. I made, in fact, travels in different countries in continuation of my studies of former times, social geography, different societies at different stand. I must remember my Stufen, what's that?
Stages of human development.
Human development,
yes. Well, that's a very interesting synthetic paper where the rent capitalism is...
It was again a sketch.
Yes.
Like everything I did more or less, except a few late
works. Well, but it
was a sketch only. And I wanted to work it out, and this needed to see other countries, more countries
Atlas
than I had
of
seen.
Austria was not a sketch.
Yes, that was not a sketch. That is my great trouble, or has been my great trouble, but now it's finished. I wanted to find a program for this commission I mentioned in the Academy of Science, which would not too much take my forces, but in fact it did. As always. First, I had a round of geographers and other people to help me in the reduction of this atlas, but as it usually is the case, they left me single and so on. So it grew into a very big work which left only little time for other aspects. And this is one of the reasons why I did not write my social geography. I did not finish, well, mainly that, I would say, I wanted to do. And so I am now...
Let me ask you. After all, this atlas is finished. It's finished. It is a monument.
But I am finished also.
Oh no. Well, now you know nowadays they make these sort of things by computers. What do you think about that?
Well, of course, this fact that the new philosophy of science has also conquered Austria, the German-speaking and the German-speaking area, disturbed me very deeply, I must say, because I had no idea of these ways of thinking before. I had taken two steps to other philosophers of older thinking, but they were also thrown away by the new Popper and other people. So, in fact, and also the modern methods, mathematical methods, and all that, this is for me not graspable, I would say. Not that I don't understand the philosophy of science. I totally agree with it, with one Einschränkung, what's that? Restriction. Exception, yeah. One restriction. I would say not everything must be driven to the utmost exactitude of calculation. There is some sense in more or less intuitive, but initiated, intuitively initiated, and then proved hypothesis, then proved in the more or less in the old way or also in the new way. But what I want to express with that is I would not be so strict as people generally nowadays is or are. I wouldn't be so strict as to put away all the intuitive ways of thinking about things.
But your curve of thinking must have moved a little bit back and forth, because you have told me before that you reacted in your early days when you dealt with geomorphology. You thought that your seniors were a bit too intuitive and you wanted more precision.
I agree nowadays as well, but I do not agree. Well, I agree with everything which is done today. Also, these tryings to reach the most exact conclusions. But I have a little feeling of doubt that figures can fully ersetzen, what is ersetzen? Fully replace or substitute knowledge by looking at things and studying, thinking about things, and so on. I feel that a slight drawback to these old methods of studying integrated objects, I must come back to that, Objects are things which we can grasp and we can study also by measuring and so on. We should not quite leave out of our mental field the bigger areas and bigger and more complicated Zusammenhänge. What's that? Relationships and all that. I have a feeling that a bit of that may come back later, sooner or later. And it won't harm the exactitude of, but it should not, for getting the best and the most exact results, it should not be that the approach, the question which should be answered is chosen too small, too trivial, and too non-geographic. This would I call non-geographic, not in the old sense of geography, feeling of geography, to give an idea of the large relationships and so on. So I do not deny the present.
No. I have a feeling that this German tradition of trying to grasp the landscape as a whole and also to be integrative has a rather strong artistic component. Isn't that true?
I think so, yes. I think so. It may well be that all people who have an artistic feeling stick to that or find there their satisfaction.
You must, after all, have enjoyed making beautiful maps, for example.
I have. This was a small Trost. Trost, what is Trost?
Yeah.
I don't know now. Consolation.
Consolation, yes.
Consolation. I have indeed felt it was a Herausforderung. What's that again?
A challenge.
A challenge, yeah. It was a challenge to me to solve the problem, give good and exact scientific material, offer that, and still make it nice, legible, and also agreeable a picture.
And you think this is something which should be respected not only with map making, but geography as a whole would have a sort of...
I don't say that. Everybody can use his own predilections.
Yes.
So it was for me personally, it was quite a certain recompensation for larger losses.
Now, let me ask you a final question. Now, what are you currently working on? Have you been able to pick up some of your earlier thoughts?
In fact, I am working on several works which I am establishing with helpers, as not alone, which stay still in connection with the Atlas. The most interesting maps I wanted to explain in full detail, and also treat them in as a problem. You see, so to make a bit more than just an atlas.
I see. Now, what about the Iranian experiences?
I have recently published something about Iranian observations in Iran, which were done in the 50s or 60s. So there is not very much now to do in this direction, but what I still have in mind is to go back to rent capitalism, because I had a number of critiques by neo-Marxist people mostly, very clever people and good critique, but not so relevant for me, because I'm not a dogmatician, a Marxist dogmatician. I do not swear in Marx's concepts and nothing else. I feel free to be a free scientist. So I am still convinced of rent capitalism. I feel glad today, exactly today, I got several publications by a man whom I don't know, but who sent his publications to me, obviously to show me that he found the same facts, also with small changes, of course, as everywhere. Things are a little bit different, but it is exact rent capitalism which he found.
So you are really in a position to be able to see a continuous line in your thought.
In those days when I made these stages in development, I had not so much real exact studies at hand. I had so much at hand that I feel sure of what I said, but not so much as now is at hand. I want to run through that to find out how these things have developed. For me, it is an important factor in the whole problem of development and helping of underdeveloped
to understand
countries.
the preconditions for change, certainly.
Because the theories of from the economic side, they don't consider what was there before. The capitalist world has promoted underdevelopment, that it was before there already, doesn't come out, is not considered. So this is not the way to handle with success these problems.
No, it's good to know that you are busy and have plans for the future. I would like to thank you very much for this conversation. It has been very interesting. Thank you very much.
I thank you very much that you have visited me and forced me to think about some connections which were not so clear before to me.